This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Hello. Whoa. There's a bunch of cat hair on my microphone. Hello, everyone. And welcome to Death by Southwest. Lots of cat hair on my microphone. I'm eating it. Yeah. Hi, guys. It's Tuesday evening, so I'm a little late to the recording of this, but I am recording it. It's about to storm here, which I love, and I have Henry sitting right next to me, and Kat is eating food on the other side of me that you can probably hear. I wanted to first apologize for my bonus episode yesterday. I tried to listen to it today when I was taking Jinx, the dog that I dog walk. Sorry, I'm still picking cat hair off the microphone out of my mouth. When I was taking him to doggy daycare, because in the summer I don't walk him, I take him to doggy daycare and then pick him up and take him home. And so I tried listening to it today because I think I don't always listen to the episodes after I put them out, the bonus or regular. But sometimes I try to because I think it's helpful. You know, you learn from hearing yourself. And I learned from listening to yesterday's bonus episode that I sounded like a psychopath. Like, I jumped around so much. I also said, and like 1,000 times. And I really thought that I'd gotten better about both of those things. Because I know when we started in the very beginning, I was hyper aware of how often I said the word, or like. Uh-oh, both the dogs are going to start barking because it's thundering. So apologies for that. See, I almost said just there. People on Patreon can probably see it. But I caught myself. I'm going to try to, like, a pause is okay. It's okay to have a silence. I don't need to fill it with So that is what I wanted to say about that. Is the same thing as kind of.
Birthdays, anniversaries, weddings, whatever the occasion, it just got a little more personal with meaningful photo gifts from Shutterfly. Add a silly photo to a gold-rimmed mug for your bestie. Put your sweet puppy on a cozy fleece blanket for your teen. Gift your husband a desktop plaque featuring all the kids. Enjoy 40% off orders over $29 with code POD40 at Shutterfly.com and make something that means something.
Henry's kind of snoring. Indiana's the only one barking. We're just going to keep going. So I was debating doing the mini episode because I really like it, or doing this full episode, which I also like. I decided to do the full one. Obviously, I did not record the mini episode yesterday. I don't know. I was thinking before I've been waking up at like 4. You don't know that. I don't know why I said I have been waking up at like 4 because I've been going to bed so incredibly early. And I don't really I kind of just, like, I'll read or I'll doze a little bit because it's still dark. So I'm not going to take Henry walking when it's still dark. So I was thinking tomorrow when I wake up at 4, instead of just sitting there dozing, I could just make coffee and come record the mini episode. And I have another episode that I want to do Friday with my friend Jackie. So that'll probably be next week's episode. So now that I've fully shared the whole plan, I'm just going to jump into this episode. Wow, my screen is bright. Today's episode takes place in Taos, New Mexico. It is located in Taos is in northern New Mexico. It's in the Southern Rockies, and it's at the base of I never know how to say these mountains, the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, I think is how you say it. Elevation is about 7,000 feet. Oh my gosh, Indiana. does look really eerie and spooky outside, which is concerning me that I'm going to lose internet, which I can still record with internet. Oh no, I can't because all my notes are online. Shit. Okay, well, I'm going to keep going until hopefully we don't lose internet. But with all the barking, I think maybe we'll pause for a second and I'll close the blinds. I think that's the best course of action here. Okay.
Recording in progress.
I'm back. I just turned back on the Zoom and the audio recording. I don't know if you can hear the rain. It is now raining. Started raining in the past 2 minutes since I got up to close the blinds. So usually when we get late evening rains like this, I don't know if it's the area that I live in, or I think the only internet that people really have is Cox internet. So I was going to say, I don't know if it's my internet provider, but I think that's all there is in Tucson, really. I find that when it rains, like as it's getting dark, I tend to lose power. So we will do the best we can with this. And if I lose power, I'll finish it in the morning. Okay. I mean, nobody's listening to it's 7 o'clock at night here. People on the West Coast, it's 10 o'clock. You're asleep. People in the middle of America are getting ready for sleep, and people here are eating dinner. So nobody's even listening to this tonight. That's how I'm justifying this. Okay, so Taos. Taos is pretty small, about 6,000 residents, but it has a really big tourist population. There's a lot of visitors because it's got a lot of natural beauty, a lot of cultural attractions. It's about 70 miles north of... Wow, sorry about that. I was exporting the bonus episode from last night, the video, to upload to Patreon. And it just finished exporting and just popped open. We're off to a rocky start here, guys. Apologies again. So if you know New Mexico, Taos is about 70 miles north of Santa Fe and 135 miles northeast of Albuquerque. Like I said, it's in northern New Mexico. There is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Taos Pueblo. It's a National Historic Landmark. It's been continuously inhabited for over 1,000 years and is one of the oldest continuously inhabited communities in the United States. It's a big place for art, a big artist colony there. Artist colony? Artist hub, I guess is a better way to say that. And there's also a historic home there called the Mabel Dodge Lujan House, and it's a historic home that became a center for artists, writers, and intellectuals, hosting people like Georgia O'Keeffe, D.H. Lawrence, and Ansel Adams. So it's a real artsy kind of place. This is kind of an interesting fact about Taos. We've never had one in Taos, so for longtime listeners, you know that we don't really do the sense of place anymore. And for new listeners, we used to do this every episode, but we've had such repeated locations that we stopped doing it. Also, Jenna and I tended to get carried away with chit chat, and people did not care for that. So, but because we've never had one in Taos, and it is I've never been there, but it looks like such a cool location, I thought I should give some background. Hopefully the rain on my like little tin roof here isn't too annoying. Okay, so Taos is famous for the mysterious Taos hum, a low-frequency sound that some residents and visitors claim to hear. The source of this hum has never been definitively identified, which has led to a bunch of different theories ranging from geological activity to psychological phenomena. I think that's really cool. Taos Ski Valley is a renowned destination for winter sports, lots of challenging terrain and deep powder, and apparently has a European-style atmosphere. And let's see what else. So despite being at like 7,000 feet elevation, which is pretty high, I know that Flagstaff here in Arizona I believe is about 8,000 feet elevation. And it's, I lived there for years, and the summers, it really, like, I didn't have air conditioning in my apartment. Summers didn't really get, maybe we'd hit 90 sometimes, but it was like a really manageable 90. And then, regular like fall type temperatures and spring, and then winter, it would snow, it would be cold. And that was at 8,000 feet, which is vastly different from down here in Arizona, in Tucson. But apparently Taos, even though it's at 7,000 feet elevation, it's still considered part of the high desert, which means that it has cold winters, mild summers, and about 300 days of sunshine. Oh, so that must be just like Flagstaff. Maybe Flagstaff is considered the high desert. Taos is also known for its hippie culture. In the 60s and 70s, it became a center for the counterculture movement, attracted many hippies and back to the land enthusiasts. There was a lot of communes around town. And finally, the Native American culture is deeply ingrained in Taos. There's a lot of Native American traditions, artwork, architecture that really reflects the influence of the Taos Pueblo community. So, and I thought I liked this sentence I found. Taos, New Mexico is a small town with a big personality. I like that. I'm really intrigued to go there, actually, now. I would really like to go. I'm not sure how far it is from Tucson. I mean, Albuquerque's quite a drive, and it's 135 miles northeast. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll go. So today's story is about, well, it takes place in Taos, and we're going to learn about our main character. Her name is Marioara, and I'm going to do my best to not mispronounce this, but looking at her name, I want to say Maori, which is not her name. It's Marioara. So Marioara was born in 1966. She was born in former Yugoslavia and raised in Sweden, though. So in her, early years, her family moved her to Sweden. She was raised there. And since she wasn't from there, so she didn't have a lot of friends, and she became really independent. She liked to do things alone. She was a pretty private person. She enjoyed spending time by herself, and that transferred into her adulthood. As she grew up, she was the same. She was very smart. Her friends described her as really classy. She was always very put together. She loved to travel, so she was described as a world traveler. And she was a petite woman, but had a really, even though she was private and liked to do things alone, when she was with people, she was very extroverted. She was spunky. She was sharp-witted. And she eventually took a job as a flight attendant in the Middle East for Gulf Airlines, and she was stationed in Bahrain. Now, I watched several videos about this story, and one man, all you pronunciation people who hate this, tune me out for a second. One man kept calling it Bahrain, and then everyone else said Bahrain. And Bahrain feels more correct to me, so I'm going to say that. But for any of those like sticklers who listen who are like, oh, you mispronounced this, I realize that I may be mispronouncing it, but I don't care. That's how I'm going to say it. So while she was stationed in Bahrain, she met a naval pilot named Mike Shand, and they hit it off instantly. In 1992, they were married after a brief romance. And Mike was transferred back to a fleet squad in Hadford, California. And they were married, so she went with him. Not too long after that, Mike started getting really extreme headaches. And they did some testing, and they found out that he had contracted a fungus in his brain, which, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that feels like. I don't know exactly what it is. Sorry, that's some loud thunder. The dogs might bark. or wine, but just hearing brain fungus, something about it really turns my insides. Oh, I can't even imagine that I would imagine it's very terrible. And obviously it was, per this next part. It was, the headaches were so extreme, and it was such apparently dangerous fungus, that Mike had pretty invasive surgery to have it removed. And they did seem to get all of it, but because the surgery was so invasive, he was really prone to seizures after that. And it was it was a really long, difficult recovery. But Marioara was by his side the whole time. It was tough on both of them, but they made it through. And a lot of people said that they felt that this really solidified their bond even further. Like, it really cemented their commitment to each other, because they had made it through this like terrible thing. They were so happy to be through it. Mike was so happy to be getting better. Unfortunately, a few years later in 1996, there was even more tragedy in store for this couple. Around 7:30 p.m. one evening, Mike was involved in a car accident, and it was a fatal accident in which he was killed. The driver of the other vehicle, a truck, Mike was in like a little sporty car, and a man driving a truck was drinking and crossed over the center line on the highway. When police went to tell Marioara, she was obviously devastated. She felt like her whole world had collapsed. She didn't know life here very much without Mike, because they met in Bahrain and lived there. She went through a period where she was really, really just angry at life, and that their time together had been cut so short, which is really gets me, really tugs at my heartstrings, especially if you listen to the bonus. You know that I've been having intrusive thoughts about death and life and making the most out of life, and how life is so short and you have such limited time here. And so reading about this story, it broke my heart, that they made it through so much, and only to, she ended up losing him in the end. But her anger eventually softened, and she found some comfort and solace in her late husband's friend, Michael Edmonds. Their friendship grew. They supported each other. They had both lost Mike, and were very sad about it. And that friendship eventually turned romantic. They were very happy together. And by the summer of 2002, Michael Edmonds was getting out of the Navy. They were dating at this point, and they decided to move to Taos, New Mexico. They were both like giddy with excitement and anticipation of this new life that they were going to start together in Taos. It's a very cute, artsy town, and they bought a house that they started to fix up. When they moved there, they built a garden. They loved decorating the house together and kind of DIY improvements. They really loved their new life at first. From the outside, it continued to look like this perfect relationship. Perfect, it's tragic the way they found each other, but they're so happy. However, that's how it looked from the outside. Not everything was perfect and hunky-dory in their relationship. There was definitely darkness in their relationship. And a lot of that came from the fact that Marioara was never really able to get fully over the kind of suddenness and the violence that was involved with losing her husband. And that came out in other ways, which was difficult on Michael. She didn't necessarily she didn't act angry or sad or pick a fight and say, like, this is because I'm not quite over my the suddenness of losing my husband, as so often with our emotions, they come out in other ways. Whoa. I don't know if you can hear that thunder and that rain, but it's a lot. So they were having a hard time. Their initial bliss kind of gave way to struggle. And after only a few months of living together, Marioara decided to move out. She wanted to get her own apartment. So she got a small apartment. It was located in this church plaza way on the other side of town in an area called Ranchos de Taos. It was very tiny, 1 bedroom with a bathroom. The kitchen and living room was like the other room in the house. But she liked it. And she liked that she had neighbors. It was kind of like a ground floor. Nobody can see me except for Patreon, so I don't know why I'm waving my hands around like this. But it wasn't like an apartment complex where there's lots of apartments stacked on top of each other. It was kind of like what I live in, like little casitas almost, but they were connected. They weren't freestanding. I don't know why I felt the need to explain that so much. But she liked it because she had neighbors. She found comfort in getting to know her neighbors, getting to know her landlord and his family. Her landlord was named Mr. Duran. He was a very kind man, and he had a grandson, Nathaniel, that was sometimes around and helping out around the apartments. She got a part-time job working at a nearby hotel. She was kind of thriving in her momentary independence. It wasn't necessarily forever, but for now, she was enjoying it. And that is until Tuesday, July 9th, 2002. Around 6 p.m., a call came in to 911. The call was from one of Marioara's neighbors, and they said, her car hasn't moved for like a few days, and she's not answering her door, and I don't know, she usually is like coming and going. We see her more frequently, and I'm just a little worried. Can you send someone over to do a welfare check? They said, Taos police said sure, or dispatch said sure, sent police out. Police came and walked up, knocked on the door. Nobody's answering. And then they noticed some blood on the exterior of Marioara's apartment. So they got inside. And when they walked inside, what they found was shocking. And I did see photos from this crime scene, and it was shocking. There was blood all over. So much blood. There's blood on the floors, blood on the walls, blood splatter on the paintings on the walls. And that was just what they saw when they first walked in. It wasn't, like I said, it was a small apartment. So they quickly made their way through the apartment until they found the body of 36-year-old Marioara. They could immediately see that she had various stab wounds throughout her body. They could see on her hands and arms that she had defensive wounds. So they, call the detectives, call crime scene, call the coroner, and while all those people are arriving, they begin carefully walking through the crime scene looking for clues. And as the investigators arrived, they joined in, and what they found was blood spatter on the door jambs, the front door. And based on Marioara's approximate height, they were able to conclude that she was likely struck in the face and or head about 3 times right in the doorway. With all the blood splatter. Is it splatter or spatter? Have I asked that before? Because I never know. Either way, with all of the blood, it was apparent that she had put up quite a fight. What they kind of gathered from the blood on the floor, and there was shoe prints in it, and then there was also slip marks in front of her bedroom door, where she was trying to keep someone out. So she made her way into the bedroom and was trying to shut the door and keep them from coming in. And her feet, there's so much blood that her feet are slipping in the blood. Terrible. The killer eventually overpowered her and ended up killing her with all of the stabbing. The rear window of the bedroom, it had arterial spray, which indicated that she was likely trying to get out of the bedroom window because that was the only exit from the bedroom. So she was trying to get out of there when they probably gave one of the final stabs. The way that she was on the floor, her legs were pushed open. They believe she was sexually assaulted. She had been stabbed 8 times, it looked like, and her throat had been slit. And it was just a very gruesome, very brutal scene. They noted that it didn't appear that anything was taken or stolen. All of, like, there was jewelry, TV, purse, like nothing had been taken. So they pretty quickly ruled out that this was a burglary, meaning that it was probably targeted at Marioara. It's okay. Sorry, guys. Recording in a storm is not ideal. Okay. So one major clue that they did find, I mentioned before, is footprints. And they, of course, weren't sure if these were her footprints or the attacker's footprints. But based on the fact that the slit marks on one side of the bedroom door and the footprints on the other, they believed these footprints belonged to the I want to say unsub, because I've been watching so much Criminal Minds, and that stands for unidentified subject, because they don't know who the killer is. I'm going to start using that because I don't like saying attacker, murderer, suspect, unidentified suspect, right? Unsub. Okay. Sorry. So that was one of the biggest clues that they noticed at first. But when the coroner came to remove the body, they found another pretty big clue. When the coroner got her body up, underneath her head was a man's watch, which they were assuming more than likely came off during this altercation. There was one critical clue that they didn't find, though, and that was the murder weapon. Also, there was no forced entry, which meant that she likely knew her attacker, or at least opened the door and spoke to them. So they immediately start investigating beyond her apartment, and they start speaking to the neighbors. So they talked to the landlord, Mr. Duran's grandson, Nathaniel, because he actually lived in the apartment next door to her. And, asking him, did you see anything? Did you hear anything? And he said, no, I didn't see or hear anything. They asked if he knew her, and he said, I'd only been in the apartment once before, but it was before she moved in to help my grandfather with some electrical appliance stuff. I did move a few boxes for her. But he's like, no, I didn't really know her. So police are wrapping up their questioning with him, and he said, but you should talk to a friend of mine, because he's been acting really weird lately. I just feel like something's up with him. He said, my friend's name is Mitchell Rhodes. It's okay, Indiana. Indiana is sitting under the desk. She's scared. He said, my friend is Mitchell Rhodes. He's 19 and he lives less than a mile from here. And he's been arrested before. And I don't know. He's just been acting really strange lately. The police were like, okay, sure. Well, yeah, we'll take any lead now. So they go, they get his address. They go to speak with Mitchell and they record the interview. I heard some of it. And they're like, where were you the night of the murder? So July 9th, when they find her, I believe is a Tuesday. And they're estimating that she was probably murdered over the weekend at some point. So they go speak with Mitchell and they say, where were you this weekend? Where were you the night of the murder? It was probably, we think, Saturday night, Sunday morning. He says, I think I was at a party, but I can't remember if it was Friday or Saturday night. He just kept saying, and like I said, I heard the interview. I can't remember. And he said, I'm not too good about keeping days, man. which I thought was funny. When somebody's like, well, what'd you do this week? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not too good at keeping days. So, God, I'm worried that this is going to be hard to hear with the rain. Okay, sorry guys. I wanted to stop and see how it sounded. It doesn't sound great with the rain in the background. And unfortunately, I can't escape that because my house is, it's just how it is. So I think we're going to pause. I can't decide if I should pause and finish this like early in the morning or keep going. Okay, I take it back, guys, because the rain has stopped. But now I realize that I was like yelling the whole beginning part of this story. So, sorry. Okay, let's continue. There's been a lot of interruptions. I apologize. So, they go to speak to Mitchell. He says he can't remember. He's not too good about keeping days, man. He would like give a date. He was like, yeah, I was there Friday. And then he was like, no, it was Saturday. No, it was Friday. And then police said that like the locations were not consistent. And finally he said, I can't remember the dates or the times because my watch broke. And they were like, oh. Initially, like when they first heard that, they were like, oh, did it? But then they saw that he was wearing a watch. And they were like, but you're wearing a watch. And it looks a little loose. One of the police officers said, is that how the kids are wearing them these days? And Mitchell said, yeah, my watch did break. And then my grandma gave me this one about a week ago. They were like, okay. They thought it just seemed weird. Like that was a big piece of evidence they found was the watch. And now this person that they got a tip that was acting strange, like his watch broke, he got a new watch. It just seemed a little bit weird. So they asked him for a DNA sample. And Mitchell agreed. He supplied a DNA sample, but before they could even ship it off to the lab, they got another 911 call to Taos Dispatch. Jeez. To Taos Dispatch. And this call was to report another homicide of a young female, apparently very brutal and similar to Marioara's. This was another single female living alone and had injuries and sexual assault that was consistent with Marioara's attack. So this new victim was 22-year-old mother Leanne Martinez. And of course, the first thing cops are thinking is, do we have a serial murderer and rapist on our hands? And they didn't know. These seemed to be very similar murders, a similar MO, but they weren't sure. So they didn't know if they should warn the public or not. They didn't want to warn the public because then they're going to get a ton of false tips, could create a panic. But in the end, they decided it's more important to warn the public than not. In case there is a serial murderer and rapist, we want people to be vigilant. So they put out a warning to the public. People were on very high alert in this pretty small town. And police were kind of unsure what their next move was in this investigation. But then they got a new lead after they talked to some of Marioara's coworkers. So Marioara's co-workers informed police that Marioara and her boyfriend, Michael Edmonds, had been fighting a lot lately. So badly, in fact, that's why she had moved out and into an apartment by herself. So police are thinking, okay, well, this seems more fitting because a stabbing, like a crime this violent and brutal, is generally a crime of passion. That's at least where you go to first usually. Or it's personal. And stabbing, which I have learned from Criminal Minds, it can be interpreted as a form of sexual release. So a lot of times offenders will use stabbing in place of sex. It's symbolic of penetration. So it allows the offender to experience a sense of dominance, control, or sexual gratification through the act. And because it is such a intense and like it's personal, you're so close. It's not, you can shoot somebody from far away. This is such a up close method of hurting or killing somebody, that it often indicates some type of deep rage, obsession, or a connection to sexual violence. So to them, it would make sense if it was Michael Edmonds because, maybe not even ex-boyfriend, but just they're on a break. So now police really want to talk to Michael Edmonds. And they secured a search warrant for his home, and he headed over there. They said, "Do you know Marioara Shand?" And he said, "Yes, of course. She's my friend." And the police said, "Well, she's been murdered," which I thought, what if this guy isn't the killer? She didn't move out that long ago. They bought a house together. That's kind of harsh, Well, she's been murdered. And that's really how he said it, how the officer said it. It just feels insensitive. However, they're thinking that this is, at this point, they're thinking he could be the guy, or he is the guy, the unsub. So they search his home, and they made him sit in the living room. I saw an interview with him. He said he had to be escorted to the bathroom. So officers are looking to see, basically, when they're searching his home, can they corroborate any of the evidence at the scene with anything in Michael's house? Maybe a receipt for buying a watch or a watch box. They were even looking for photographs of him maybe wearing the watch. They also were interested in his shoes and what kind of shoes does he wear? Could the sole pattern be a match? So they took several boxes of things from Michael Edmonds' house, and they asked to interview him. He said, sure. And their number one question was, where were you at the time, the night of the murder? And he says he was home alone, and he unfortunately has no one to verify that. He also was new in town, like Marioara, so didn't really have any friends. And he said that, he could tell the police were kind of looking to him as a suspect, and he started getting defensive and angry. He was kind of like, how dare you imply that I had anything to do with this? Then they noticed that he has a knife block in his kitchen, and several of the knife slots are empty, and they don't seem to be in any drawers or dishwasher. So they asked him about it, and he was like, well, I bought it a la carte. I bought the block, and then I just have periodically bought knives to go in it, which he realized sounds like kind of a flimsy answer. So he's getting nervous. They're then looking at his house, at his hands with a special light to see if they see any blood. They didn't. And as they were wrapping up, Michael then had a few questions for the police. He said, he says, where did this occur? And they were like, you don't know? He said, no, I don't even know where she's been. I don't even know where she lives. And police kind of looked at each other like, what? Didn't you move here together? Okay, she moved out and got her own apartment, but And Michael explained that it wasn't uncommon for Marioara to disappear for a while, to go somewhere on her own. She was a very independent person who kind of came and went a lot. I don't know if police bought it or not, but they said, okay, well, we'd really like a DNA sample. He said, fine. He provided one. At this point, police are pretty suspicious of Michael, but they really have no reason to detain him. So the next day, the autopsy report comes back, confirms that Marioara had been stabbed 8 times. She had incise wounds on her hands and fingers, so I guess defensive wounds. And her official cause of death was loss of blood from stab wounds. This is... So the autopsy, I don't know how, but it did show that she did not die quickly. She died slowly, and that she was likely alive while she was being raped, but slowly bleeding out, which is horrific to think about. Those being the last moments of your life. It's absolutely terrible. A positive was that they were able to obtain semen from her autopsy. I guess there was some semen residue on her leg. So they were able to take that. And unfortunately, in 2002, DNA was not what it is today. So they had to find another DNA sample to try and match up with this. It wasn't like running it through a machine where there's tons of DNA samples already in there. But thanks to Michael Edmonds' DNA sample, they were able to quickly rule him out. So police began a joint investigation with the sheriff's department, given that Marioara's and Leanne Martinez's murders were so similar. So now these two kind of task forces are working together. After some digging, they discovered that the women didn't know each other, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't still be one killer. Just because the women didn't know each other, who cares? Serial killers kill lots of people who don't know each other. So police received a tip regarding the Leanne Martinez case. The caller, who was anonymous, said that a man named Richard Fresquez sold a stolen car stereo similar to the one missing from Leanne's car to them. Like, okay. So they look up this Richard Fresquez and they go to find him, but he's nowhere to be found. But through going to all the places where he might be, they end up talking to some of his friends and family, and they learn that he went to go stay at his cousin's house for a while. So they go there. They don't find him there, but they do find some of his clothing there. They also searched the trash cans outside of the home, and they found shoes with blood on them. So they retained the clothing and the shoes as evidence. They were anxious to see if these shoe prints matched the ones in Marioara's apartment and if the blood was Marioara's and Leanne's or Leanne's, could be either, and or. So while they're waiting on the blood sample results and the results from the shoes, the police are trying to find a connection between this Richard Fresquez and either of the murdered women, Leanne and Marioara. So they can't seem to initially find a connection between Marioara and Richard Fresquez, but they did find a connection between Richard and Leanne. Leanne apparently had a really wide circle of friends, and Richard Fresquez was occasionally part of that group, not like one of her closest knit friends, but was around. So they were still hoping to find some kind of link between Richard and Marioara, because now they had linked Richard to Leanne. So if they could link him to Marioara, then they had a pretty good feeling that this could be their unsub. So they go to the hotel where Marioara worked part-time. She was working as a housekeeper when she was working there, and they spoke to her manager. So after digging through some, they were asking the manager, do you know a Richard Fresquez? Has he ever stayed here? And so the manager dug through some files and did find a check-in receipt from a Richard Fresquez who checked into the hotel on June 8th at 4:54 p.m. and checked out on June 9th. They also were able to determine from these records that Marioara cleaned his room after he checked out, which meant that maybe they never came in contact with each other, but they certainly could have. Like, I've been at a hotel before and I'm leaving as the cleaning crew is like coming up the hallway. Like they could have crossed paths. This was about a month before her murder. So it's possible. And much to their surprise, they actually find yet another connection between them. They got a tip from someone who worked at the church. Remember I said she moved into a small apartment in a church complex. There was a church in the same complex as her. And they got a tip from someone who worked in the church that said they had hired Richard Fresquez to do some work on the church while Marioara was living there. Now, I don't know. What confused me about this is like the hotel stuff, they went looking for that. But how do they get a tip? Like someone just called in. Like no one knows that they're trying to connect Richard Fresquez to Marioara. Like that's not public knowledge, I'd assume. So I found it interesting that they got a tip. Anyways, about a week later, Richard Fresquez was finally found in California. He was arrested for a past parole violation. And so the investigators in Taos head out to California to question him while he's in custody. They asked his whereabouts during the presumed dates of when Marioara was murdered. He said, he was like, oh, I was here. I was there. I was with friends. We went to a party here and then we went over here. He was basically saying I was nowhere near that apartment. And they said, were you ever in that church plaza in June or July? And he said, no, which goes against the tip that they got, but okay. So they decided to kind of change tactics from just having like a casual conversation questioning him to something a bit more intense. And this to me was a big jump. So one of the investigators said, at this point in time, let me go ahead and tell you, you did cause the death of Leanne Martinez. We know that. And let me explain. And Richard is like, wait, what? Like interjecting. And the investigator's like, hold on. Let me tell you. I believe it was probably an accident, right? It probably wasn't intentional, but it did happen. And Richard is like, what? No, I didn't do this. So they're trying to get him to admit to accidentally murdering Leanne, which I don't know how you accidentally stab somebody multiple times, but that's what they're going for. Seems like a weird tactic to me. And it didn't work for Richard. He was like, I did not do this. However, he did provide a DNA sample and promptly asked for an attorney. So all they could do was wait on the DNA analysis. And when the DNA analysis came back, police were finally able to determine if Leanne and Marioara's murders were connected or not. Because the crime lab reported that they did have a match for Richard Fresquez. The semen that was recovered from Leanne's body was Richard Fresquez's. So was the blood that was found on those shoes in the garbage can. But there was no match to the semen or blood at Marioara's murder. So Richard Fresquez is charged with the murder of Leanne Martinez. That case is closed. But unfortunately for Marioara's murder, they're kind of back at square one. Until they get another tip. This case is really built on tips. They get another tip. Somebody calls and says that they have info about Marioara's murder. The caller says, I heard about that murder of that lady in Ranchos de Taos, New Mexico, and I know who did it. The caller says, his name is Nathaniel Duran, and I seen him full of blood. The caller said he gave Nathaniel a ride. Nathaniel was acting weird. He had visible blood on his hair, nose, and ear. And the caller said, and Nathaniel even told me he killed a woman. So police are like, all right, you got to come in. We need to talk to you. Still anonymous to us. But the caller went in. He says that he went to give Nathaniel a ride, and Nathaniel gets in the car and is visibly shaken. And the friend is like, what's going on? And Nathaniel was like, I don't want to talk about it. And the friend was saying, we've known each other forever. We've been in each other's lives forever. You can tell me anything, man. And Nathaniel says, I did something bad to this girl. And the friend says, is she okay? Is she dead? And Nathaniel says, I stabbed her 8 times in the neck. And the friend says, why? And Nathaniel says, it was the devil in me. The friend asked Nathaniel, he said, were you doing any drugs or cocaine? And Nathaniel says, yeah, I was high. Well, unless it is this person who's called and now come in with this tip who committed this murder, then police are fairly certain it's Nathaniel, because the fact that Marioara was stabbed 8 times specifically in the neck, that was not released to the public at this point. It was just that it was a stabbing. It wasn't even released to the public that it was in her neck. So this tip, very, very specific tip, plus the fact that Nathaniel had previously met Marioara and he had access to her home, technically. I mean, maybe he didn't, but he could have gotten it. You know, his grandfather was the landlord. He lived next door to her. He was the prime suspect. So apparently they went to search his home and he wasn't there, but they were able, like they must have had a search warrant and they were able to search it even though he wasn't there. And they pretty quickly found shoes that they knew without even testing them. Like they still tested them, but they knew these shoes were a match to the shoe prints in Marioara's home. So they brought him in for questioning. They asked him for a DNA sample. And he agreed. He was very nervous. He kept saying, how long does it take to get the results back? And they were like, well, I mean, they come back pretty quick. He was quite nervous. They asked him what he was doing on July 6th or 7th of last week. He said, I was out of the area with friends at a party, clearly distancing himself from the murder scene. They're watching his body language, watching how he's acting, and the very nervous behavior combined with the tip, combined with the shoes, there's no question in their mind now. So one of the investigators says, look, we've been working for quite a while on all these cases, and thus far, it shows that you're responsible. And Nathaniel tries to interject. And the police officer says,
recording in progress.
Sorry, guys. I had to turn off everything for a second because I've been having a terrible cough. I didn't want to cough rudely into the microphone. So Nathaniel's trying to interject when the investigator says, you're responsible. And he says, hold on. The investigator says, hold on. Let me just tell you what drew us to the conclusion. And Nathaniel's like, you guys are going to try and pin this on me, bro? And the investigator says, Nathaniel, it's not even a question of if you did or didn't. You did.
Recording in progress.
Sorry, guys. I'm having a coughing fit. This recording was kind of doomed, but I'm going to finish it. And I really apologize for all the interruptions with the rain in Indiana and the coughing. And so I'm sorry. I'm going to try to get through the end here. I apologize if it kind of ruined it. So the investigator had just said, it's not a question of if you did or didn't. You did do it. And Nathaniel breaks down, starts crying. And the investigator's like, this was an accident. It was an accident, wasn't it? He's, again, using this tactic of trying, I get the tactic. But if somebody admits to it being an accident, they're still admitting to doing it. And you can't accidentally stab someone 8 times. So I don't really see how this is an effective tactic. And it wasn't in either of these. It didn't work on Richard Fresquez, and it's not working on Nathaniel because he asks for an attorney at that point. And they kept him in custody while awaiting the DNA results. And as soon as they came back, Nathaniel Duran, he was 17 years old. He was charged with the rape and murder of Marioara Shand because his DNA was a match. So Duran goes on trial December 16th, 2003. And his defense was basically, I knew her. I went to visit her and I knocked on the door. We talked for a little bit. She invited me in and we had consensual sex. And then I left and I don't know what happened after that. That's his story at this point. And the jury is having none of it. They were like, okay. A 36-year-old, which, okay. I was just going to say something. I'm going to stop myself before I say it. I was going to say a 36-year-old woman and this 17-year-old kid. Yeah, right. But that definitely happens. So that's not really a fair, I lost the word. Either way, the jury wasn't buying that they had consensual sex and nothing else happened. They convicted him of first-degree murder, criminal sexual penetration while armed with a deadly weapon. I did not even know that was a charge, and tampering with evidence. He was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder, 9 years for criminal penetration while armed with a deadly weapon, and 18 months for evidence tampering, all of which he was not happy about. At his sentencing, he reportedly ripped his shirt off and began screaming obscenities in the courtroom. And something that wasn't, I didn't find this out, and that's why I'm including it at the end, because I didn't find it out until the end, until I had researched this and was okay, ready to go. Which is strange to me that this was not included in articles and interviews and things earlier on, but apparently in several weeks before Marioara's murder, Nathaniel had taken a plea bargain with the state for charges related to a separate home invasion. Now, there was no murder or rape, apparently, but nonetheless, home invasion is I think it sounds, maybe it doesn't to other people. To me, it sounds like kind of like, okay, well, it's not murder. It's not rape. Home invasion is huge. If you really think about it, you are forcefully entering someone's home. They could be there. It's incredibly risky for the intruder and terrifying for the homeowner. So I just, I don't know. I wanted to highlight how serious I really feel about home invasion. But that wasn't, like I said, it didn't come to light really in this story until the end. And I'm surprised because I would think that would be something that would just be one other piece of evidence kind of pointing towards Nathaniel's guilt. Either way, he was found guilty. He was sentenced to essentially the rest of his life in prison. And that was that. Several years, 5 years later, early in the morning of January 21st, 2008, Nathaniel Duran was found dead in his cell. He had apparently hung himself with his bed sheet. He was 23 years old. Prior to this, in October, so this was January, so just a few months prior, apparently Nathaniel had filed a civil suit against the New Mexico State Penitentiary challenging his confinement conditions. And I found a quote from Deputy Joni Brown of the New Mexico State Penitentiary, who said this about his conditions, quote, "He was in a level 6 super maximum security facility, which means that he had a single cell with a solid door and a small window. He was found unresponsive, sitting on the desk with a sheet around his neck, and paramedics pronounced him dead at 5 a.m. So that is the end of that. Very sad story, as all of them are. And I want to say, hopefully I did this one justice in my telling of it, but I'm pretty sure that I didn't because of all of the interruptions and starts and stops. So I think I managed to cut most of those out while I was recording out of the audio. For Patreon people, it will not be cut out of this video, so I apologize for that. And to everyone listening audio only, I apologize for all the interruptions. I think next time it's raining, I just need to wait. Or maybe I need to record earlier than when the episode is supposed to come out. That would probably be the smart thing to do. But either way, thank you for listening. I will have the mini episode out sometime, hopefully this week. I'm going to see my dad tomorrow. I'm not taking Indiana. I will be taking Henry. So hopefully no, horrific fighting incidents with my dad's dog, Butch. And then I have an episode that I'm really excited about to record with my friend Jackie for next week. So apologies again. I'm going to stop apologizing. I know it kind of annoys people and it's annoying me. So I know I'm doing it too much. So I'm going to sign off and say thanks for listening. Happy Tuesday. I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of your week. And as always, thank you for sticking with me throughout the many ups and downs of this podcast. Love all of you guys and see you soon. Not see you soon, but talk to you soon. All right, that's it. I'm leaving. Bye.
Death by Southwest is hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Executive produced by Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Jenna Schneider.
Audio editing and sound design by Margot Carmichael.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, "Good night and good luck."